Hello and thank you for joining us. On today's show, we're going to be hearing stories from the UK, Turkey, Indonesia and Australia, among others, putting a spotlight on the global climate crisis from around the world. We'll start in the Colne Valley Regional Park in the English countryside, one of 6 sites where protesters are fighting a high-speed railway, which is set to be one of the largest deforestation events the UK has ever seen. We'll take a look at it now.
A place of stunning natural beauty and a home to crucial habitats for wildlife, critical tree populations, a vital water supply and a union of resilient people determined to protect it.
I just came here just to see what it was all about. I fell in love with the woods, fell in love with the area, fell in love with the reason why people were here and just the general good vibes, and haven't left. I've been here for 6 months and got evicted recently. But now we've claimed it back, which is amazing, amazing, amazing. As you can see all the people here, there is power in numbers and people do have the power.
Camping in ankle-deep mud, scaling trees at risk of being felled and climbing under diggers is a cold and uncomfortable business. But in the fight to keep a high-speed railway from taking the place of a huge expanse of British countryside, it's proven critical. The Colne Valley is home to an aquifer that provides 22% of London's drinking water, as well as hectares of ancient woodland playing host to myriad flora and fauna, all under serious jeopardy as the debate over the future of the railway rages on and work to clear land in its path continues.
Rail transport is good for the environment, it's going to help meet net carbon targets, it's the way that we should be doing things. Forget everything that you've heard about railways. HS2 is not that.
Eviction for those protecting the area is a daily threat, but there's always a way to keep up morale.
There are many different roles and things you can do within a campaign that doesn't necessarily involve being up a tree or being there in front of security and police while they're pushing people around or being in the elements. Come for a couple of hours and talk to someone who's here and lift their spirits up. We can all do so much now with this power we have with these phones that are in our pockets to reach around the world. So please just share the images, network it.
Last month, a march took place following a section of the proposed route of the new high-speed rail line to showcase exactly what is at stake. Naturalist Chris Packham led demonstrators through the woodland to shed some light on what he sees as the heinous destruction of the English countryside.
Biodiversity loss in my lifetime has been catastrophic. We've lost somewhere between 30 to 50% of the world's wildlife since 1970. 1 in 7 of the species out here in the fields of the UK are in danger of extinction and 50% of them are in decline. We've lost 90 million birds from the UK countryside here since I've got my first pair of binoculars. That's the scale of loss that we're talking about.
Protesters have been present here for 2 years and show no signs of turning away. The resounding message? It's time to rethink HS2.
You get species here that you don't get anywhere else. It's the equivalent to our Amazon. The first day that I saw the trees being felled, I went into the site and got under the digger. It's not just me, it's many people have held the camp together and have been there day and night since October 2017. We will not give up. There are trees standing now that wouldn't be standing if people hadn't been up the trees when they came to fell them.
The Colne Valley and Uxbridge there, where felling is expected to intensify over the weekend. To find out how you can support the action or to see full interviews from that, go to the description. Now we're going to hear from Turkey, where a similarly destructive construction project is taking place, the Istanbul Canal. Luke has the story.
Istanbul is the most crowded city in Turkey. The metropolis of 15 million people sits on the Bosphorus Strait, an expanse of water separating Europe from Asia. However, the city is changing. It is currently witnessing one of the most controversial construction projects in its recent history, Canal Istanbul. The project, which is set to disrupt a large swathe of fragile ecosystem, will open a waterway on the European side of the city that will extend from the Black Sea to the Sea of Marmara and eventually into the Mediterranean. It's one of 3 major construction projects that have eaten into the already disappearing North forests, often referred to as the lungs of Istanbul. The woods, which sprawl across thousands of square kilometres, have been felled at an alarming rate as the city has expanded. The 2016 completion of a 3rd bridge across the Bosphorus, controversially named after the implacable Ottoman Sultan Selim I, marked the beginning of a 3-stage plan. It was followed 2 years later by the opening of Istanbul Airport, the city's third, which in 2014 was ordered to suspend construction by an administrative court on the grounds that the project tender had violated environmental legislation. Despite this, the groundbreaking ceremony took place unhindered a few months later. Istanbul Canal marks the third stage of a plan which has bred deep distrust in President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's environmental policies.
The project will affect marine life and marine ecosystem totally, and also in the land it will cause a total destruction. Right now about 130 organizations, NGOs, political parties, trade associations and unions came together to stop this project. And the name of this platform is Ya Kanal Ya Istanbul. It means either canal or Istanbul, because we have only two options. We will choose either Istanbul or canal. And as Extinction Rebellion Turkey, we are involved in this collaboration too, because we know that it is not acceptable and we cannot let them do it.
Controversial police guidelines have listed Extinction Rebellion as an extremist ideology alongside neo-Nazis and jihadists as well. Now, to try and understand a little bit more about what this means, I've got in the studio with us Martin. What's the latest? Could you give us an update?
Yeah, so a couple of weeks or so ago we discovered that we had been put onto this list of potentially extremist ideologies issued by the Southeastern Police Command and issued to public bodies, you know, schools, that sort of thing. Alongside many other organisations you wouldn't expect to find on the list of extremists. So we obviously took issue with this because we don't consider that we fall within the definition of extremist. And we wrote to the Southeastern Police Command and asked them to confirm that they hadn't had anyone referred to prevent from Extinction Rebellion under this guidance, and, you know, to confirm that it was an error and to withdraw it. And they have now written back to us to confirm that that is what they have done and that nobody has been referred to prevent under this guidance. But, you know, we are not particularly happy at being on this list, and we just wanted to make sure that nobody had been referred as a result.
And we're going to talk about the implications in a second, but first, what is PREVENT for anyone who doesn't know?
PREVENT is a government programme which aims to nip in the bud any extremists who might sort of appear to be turning to extremism at a particular point. So a lot of the programme is focused on things like schools. So perhaps people would be becoming more noticeably religious, for instance, and a teacher would perhaps refer to PREVENT just to make sure they weren't becoming extremists in the process.
So obviously one of XR's biggest tactics is being arrested for civil disobedience that's non-violent. What kind of implications does that have then for the movement?
Well, on the basic level, none, because, you know, the most XR actions are not particularly severe. They, you know, it's mild civil disobedience, sitting in a road or climbing a tree or something. It's not what you could consider to be extremist behaviour. So actually, in terms of day-to-day XR life, it's not particularly going to make a difference to whether you're likely to be arrested or not. What difference it might make would be in the sphere of surveillance. So we are concerned perhaps that more people might be placed under surveillance, that there might be, you know, a closer eye kept on XR and indeed other bodies on this list as a result of this. But I think the overall lesson from this is not actually that it's about XR at all. You know, we're one of many rather innocuous bodies, you know, like Greenpeace, like Plain Stupid, like CND, who have been put onto this list under this strategy. And I think it's indicative of a general attitude on the part of the authorities, which can be seen in that report which came out a few months ago from a former counter-terrorism police head, which suggested that we were an extremist ideology, and that, you know, that the authorities have in a way extended the boundaries of what might be considered to be an extremist ideology way beyond what would have been the initial parameters of the scheme, which was effectively anti-jihadism.
Well, like you said, we've seen a few situations like this in the past. Is it just another case of throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks when it comes to Extinction Rebellion? Police haven't had that much success so far.
Well, I think the thing here is that they say it was an error, but actually, you know, as I said, I think it's indicative of an attitude. And we have, as I say, written via our lawyers to the Southeastern Command to ask that this is withdrawn and to confirm that nobody was referred to prevent under this. And at the same time, there was another document that's come to our attention as a result, which is a list of logos and symbols. Many relatively innocuous symbols are on that list, including XR's logo, including Greenpeace's, including the Ukrainian national coat of arms. I mean, it's quite all-encompassing, and it's caused a bit of a row with Ukraine. But anyway, so I just think there is an attitude amongst the authorities, and again, we have via our lawyers written to the National Counter-Terrorism Police Command to ask for them to remove this logo and withdraw this list of logos, and to confirm that nobody has been disadvantaged by this. But I think what we will see is not so much individuals being arrested as a result of this sort of thing, but just that it's indicative of an attitude on the part of the authorities. And I think, we will keep seeing this. I think they will withdraw each individual document as they're discovered, but I think they'll keep putting them out, and I think we will keep seeing, especially under the current government, we will keep seeing this as a phenomenon. And I think what we will see is that people are perhaps more likely to be preemptively arrested for actions rather than actually for sitting in roads and so on, that sort of thing.
Which could absolutely have a big impact. So we basically have to watch this space, is what you're saying? We
watch it whenever it arises. We hit it with our lawyers, we get it withdrawn, and we make sure anyone disadvantaged by it is supported to take legal action. So it's effectively a whack-a-mole strategy that we have on this subject.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for letting us know a little bit more about that, letting us riddle through it with you. To learn more about the XR legal strategy, or to see the response to the story from XR, as well as lots of other useful information, follow these links on the Extinction Rebellion website, which is rebellion.earth. To Australia now, which has seen the devastating consequences of climate change in action on an unprecedented scale. Ongoing fires have ravaged 10 million hectares of land, taken away homes, and claimed lives. Right now, we're going to go and have a look at some of the actions across the globe that people have been doing to put a spotlight on the climate crisis there and put the bushfires at the front of the political agenda.
Over 1 billion animals are dead. Habitats obliterated. People are dead. This is not normal. My home, Australia, is on fire.
In the face of ongoing fires that have left 29 people dead, destroyed more than 2,500 homes, and are estimated to have killed roughly 1 billion animals, support for Australians and urgent action has been seen across the globe.
In Colombo, Sri Lanka, outside the Australian High Commission, we stand in solidarity with all the people and animals that have lost their lives. The severity of the bushfires is due to climate change.
Like a lot of Australians who live here in the UK, we're feeling quite powerless. Scotty loves a quiet Australian and we refuse to be quiet Australians. That's why we're here.
These fires have been burning since September. So far on the Australian continent, 14 million hectares have burned. That is a geographical size of Denmark. And it's really important that we come together today.
Los caminos son dos, rebelión o extinción. Y nosotros elegimos la rebelión.
Those closer to the flames are making themselves heard, with protests putting pressure on politicians ramping up in recent months.
In Extinction Rebellion South Australia, we acknowledge that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are the first sovereign nations of the Australian continent and its adjacent lands, and we acknowledge their ongoing connection to country. We acknowledge the history, laws and cultures of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people across Australia since time immemorial. And we acknowledge the historical and ongoing justice of colonial history from which settler people benefit. Extinction Rebellion has 3 demands: that the government must tell the truth by declaring a climate and ecological emergency, working with other institutions to communicate the urgency for change, that the government act now to halt biodiversity loss and reduce greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2025, and that the government create and be led by the decisions of a citizens' assembly on climate and ecological justice.
Amid the fires and the race to solve the climate crisis, a new approved project for the biggest coal mine in Australia's history. hotly contested by climate activists across Australia.
Siemens is actually enabling one of the biggest problems we've got in this country at the moment around carbon, the Adani mine in the Carmichael Basin. If the Adani mine goes ahead, it opens up an entire new area of fossil fuels which will be ripped out of the ground and burned, and this will make the problem worse. I was actually busy fighting bushfires, along with thousands of other women and men around the state, and bushfires which impacted hundreds of thousands of people. Those fires are unprecedented. We've never seen anything like it. It's global heating, it's climate change which has accelerated and made them as destructive as they are. Now this is the new normal. This is not a one-off. We'll be seeing further seasons like this. Enough. We need to see a little bit of corporate responsibility.
The fires in Australia have quite rightly been gaining lots of attention. However, there are ecological disasters happening elsewhere that aren't quite gaining that spotlight. Rampant fires and floods in Indonesia are breaking a fragile ecosystem that plays host to some of the world's most critically endangered animals. Mel from XR Indonesia has more.
Hi, I'm Mel from XR Indonesia. I'm based in Jakarta, the capital city of Indonesia. We're also the fastest sinking city in the world. We recently had some crazy floodings. 66 people died so far in the official count. And Jakarta alone was left on a standstill. Everyone was affected one way or another. There's a lot of areas that are 2 meters underwater, some were even up to 6 meters. And flooding doesn't only affect your mobility. In a lot of areas, electricity was cut off for a few hours. Some people got their water supply cut off, also have no access to food. And these are only the issues during the rainy season. Last year, we saw 2.3 million acres of forest land and peatland being burnt. That's actually around the same area as the Amazon fires, except that you don't hear much about it. We had 920,000 cases of acute respiratory infection, with 2 being fatal. On top of the burning, we also saw a lot of crop failures all around the nation. Most people are still not making the connection between the climate crisis and these incidences that are happening around them, much less the connection between the carbon emission and the climate. The media are not talking about it much either, and neither are the public. Basically, the government are still not telling the truth about the problem to the masses. At the moment, our government is still focused very much on economic growth, hinging on palm oil to fuel its growth, which actually sets us on a path of 4-degree warmer by 2050. So we are still going to do everything we possibly can to get them to take this crisis seriously, but we do need all the help we can get to apply pressure from everyone. Now more than ever is a time for us to really work together to make sure that we can avoid the future that the science have been warning us for years if we continue to do nothing.
Back to the UK, where demonstrators in Scotland have been making headlines with a rather unique protest. Let's take a look.
On the 6th of January, XR Scotland began a 10-day-long campaign to target the fossil fuel industry. The campaign started with 3 women from different XR Scotland groups scaling a gas rig in Dundee Harbour. The rig, leased by fossil fuel giant Shell, was set to leave the port to drill for liquid natural gas in the North Sea. Travelling by boat to reach the rig, the women scaled the main ladders and positioned themselves safely halfway up in order to delay the rig from leaving. Due to weather conditions, they came down by the end of the day, but not before sending a clear message to fossil fuel corporations and governments alike. The time is over for fossil fuel exploitation.
There just needs to be a red line, like no more new exploration of the North Sea.
The North Sea basin has produced almost 40 billion barrels of oil over the last 40 years, and projections of a further 20 billion barrels still to be extracted have been made. For this extraction to still be happening is clearly inconsistent with the climate and ecological emergency declared by the Scottish and UK governments. The action follows on from the Rig Rebellion, which happened in March 2019, where XR Scotland disrupted the Scottish Oil Club's annual dinner. Concerned citizens took part in a peaceful demo on Locked On inside the museum in Edinburgh, which had agreed to host the event and ultimately delayed it by 5 hours.
How you justify the oil and gas industry having a celebration like this when the IPCC report has just been released saying that we have less than 12 years left before serious catastrophe.
Billions of pounds involved in this industry are going into new oil projects.
There's no time left.
It's the oil industry. They're the people who could do something about climate change instead of denying it and covering it up and fooling politicians and the public.
Following the rig action, a former oil and gas worker and active member of XR Scotland interrupted First Minister's question time.
North Sea oil and gas plans go ahead as planned and are replicated worldwide. When will our planet crash and burn? Will my grandchildren see that?
A few days later, 4 people locked on outside of the entrances to the private investment firm Baillie Gifford, which manages MSP's pension funds, and was found that it had increased investment into Shell.
Financial systems are really fueling the climate crisis. Everyone talks about bamboo toothbrushes and disposable cups, but where no one sees them, billions and billions of pounds are being poured into Shell and BP and other such firms.
The last action took place in the oil and gas capital of Europe, Aberdeen, outside of the Shell headquarters. People from across the country locked on outside of the gates and also placed the XR Scotland boat, the Amalgoo, along Shell's HQ's private entrance. Shell is one of the top 10 carbon emitters in the world and are projected to increase their production of fossil fuels by 35%.
I watched a documentary recently that said that global temperatures could rise by up to 4 degrees and that action is required now. And that documentary was made by Shell 30 years ago.
Human rights abuses in areas like the Niger Delta and disregard for human health and safety was also at the forefront of many activists' minds. As the UN climate negotiations are set to arrive in Glasgow, we need to see real commitments to halting the biggest source of Scotland's carbon emissions and realistic plans for a workers-led just transition. Plans to maximise economic recovery of North Sea oil and gas is totally incompatible with tackling the climate emergency and delivering climate justice.
Now, in a report released last year, we found out that 71% of our global carbon emissions are caused by just 100 companies, all of them involved in the fossil fuel industry. It's clear that change is urgently needed. To find out more, I went on a wander. As we try to meet growing demands for energy, looking for alternatives to planet-polluting fossil fuels has perhaps never been more important. Every year we drive about 1 billion cars, we fly about 50 million planes and cut down about 7 billion trees. Plus, we increase our population from around already 8 billion to adding about 130 million babies annually. All of these things are pushing our planet to breaking point. As it stands, more than 80% of our energy needs are being met by fossil fuels. This is a problem because these resources are finite, they're destructive to our natural environment, and they also cause big problems to public health and drive global warming. Among the alternatives, on and offshore wind provides the UK with its greatest source of renewable energy, and across the globe, 4% of our electricity needs are met by this source. It's thought that just one rotation of those blades can provide a household with its daily use of electricity. But it does have its critics. It's thought it can be dangerous to birds and bats and can be a bit noisy. If it's done properly, it can reduce emissions by 84.6 gigatons of CO2 by 2050. Solar energy will play a key part in fighting global warming, with rooftop solar, solar farms and concentrated solar all currently curtailing carbon emissions produced by fossil fuels. Its accessibility means it's able to be used in the global north and the global south. It's increasing in popularity, and it has the potential not only to save trillions, but also reduce emissions significantly. We're in the middle of the greatest energy transition in history, and it's clear that we're going to need all alternative options to provide energy in order to fight the climate crisis. I went to go and see Dr. Ian Staffel, who is a lecturer in sustainable energy at the Centre for Environmental Policy at Imperial College London, to find out more. Thanks for joining us, Ian. It's great to have you, or great to be here.
You're welcome.
So firstly, can I ask, what does a sustainable future look like when it comes to energy?
So I think it needs to look and feel just the same as our current energy system. You want people to be familiar and comfortable with the way they interact with energy. But at the same time, it needs to look completely different in terms of how we do the things. So you'll still have electricity available at the flick of a switch. It'll be reliable, it'll be affordable. You'll still be able to drive your car to get places. You'll still have a comfortable and warm home. It's just the way that every part of this is done has to be different. So this could mean it's not a petrol or diesel car you're driving anymore, it's hydrogen or electric. Hopefully there'll be more provision for active transport, so it'll be easier to cycle and walk on short distances, and there'll be better trains and buses to help us replace the need for long distance driving or flying.
There seems to be so many solutions out there, which is a bit confusing because we haven't seen loads of progress. So why is it that we've got all these solutions but it's taking so long for us to get out of this predicament that we're in?
I know this is a huge problem, is that energy systems are incredibly slow to change. You've got the problem that it's one of the world's largest industries, trillions of dollars invested in the power stations, oil refineries, oil wells, etc. And you have to completely change from top to bottom all of these components. So it took, wind farms were being developed in the 1980s. It's taken 30 years for those to scale up to become a key part of many countries' energy systems. The same with solar. It's taken 40 or 50 years. But there's many things we can do to speed that up. We've reached the point now that we've built so much wind farms, so many solar farms, that we know how to do the manufacturing a lot better than ever before, and the costs of them are coming down. But I think the problem is both at the country scale and on the personal scale. It's often more expensive to do the right thing. Like if you think about travelling from London to Glasgow, why on earth is it cheaper to take a flight than it is to take a train? If we could do something like Germany has done, at the start of the year they cut the price of their long distance trains 10% on a climate basis because of they're being cleaner to use. So if we could do things like that and make the right choice the cheaper choice, everyone will be happy.
Are there any other countries that are doing it really well right now? For example, Iceland, I know, currently produces 100% of its energy through renewable sources. Is that realistic or idealistic?
No, I think that moving to 100% clean energy or renewable energy is very realistic. It's going to take time, effort, and a bit of money. So there's places like Iceland, places like Costa Rica, who can run on 100% renewables. It's partly because they're really small, and also they've got brilliant resources for doing this. Look at larger countries, and it will take some more time.
The future is uncertain, but one thing that is clear is that a global effort will be critical if we're going to meet our growing energy needs. Will it be enough? Only time will tell. That's almost it for the show today, but first we've got Bity Booker in the studio with us, who's a London-based singer-songwriter. Thank you for joining us, Bity. Now you're going to be performing a song for us today called Who Will Take the Blame. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's a climate change protest song.
Fantastic, very fitting then. Before we hear that, I would just like to say thank you so much for listening, and if you do want to get in touch with the show, do make sure you follow the instructions in the description. We'd love to hear from you. For now though, it's up to you.
Thank you.